Okay, introductions are hard, so I'm just going to get right into it. We're going to explore how Namielle Divinity works and how crit element works, how elemental damage is scaled, and how raw damage interacts with critical hits. So, let's just jump right into it. Since we have to experiment with elemental damage, we need to find a way to separate the elemental damage from the raw damage, and the only way we can do that is by making a control. The weapon we choose to use is the Teroth Sword Fire because it's a non-elemental weapon with a hidden element, and the hidden element isn't too high, so it doesn't make the calculations too hard. We have no armor because we need no skills right now, no crit. The only attack boosts we have are from Power Charm and Pallor Talon, and from the attack augment that I already have on the longsword. So, the control values we need are just the raw damage from 4 attacks. That's what I chose to do. So we use Step Slash, which is the forward slash with the longsword, Overhead Slash, which comes right after Step Slash if you just mash out the button, as well as Thrust and Rising Slash. Those are all part of the longsword's basic combo. So from Step Slash, we end up getting 56 damage usually, Overhead Slash gives us 49, Thrust gives us 28, and Rising Slash gives us 43. You may notice that in some of these tests that the damage values will differ, and I'll explain why later, but I have up on the screen the raw damage values, and I'll have those up on the side whenever it matters to the test. Now that we have our raw damage values, we need to test out crit. So normal critical hits increase your damage output by 25%, your raw damage output, I should be specific. So I just go ahead and wail away on the training post to see if this is true. I don't see why it wouldn't be. And it turns out to be true. I got 70 from Step Slash, 61 from Overhead Slash, 35 from Thrust, and 54 from Rising Slash. And I went ahead and did the math just to make sure, and that's all approximately a 25% increase. Some of them are exactly 25%, and some are a little bit below, like 24.8 and whatnot. Of course, I'm sure the system just rounds up or down based on that. I made this clip in specific longer just so I can show what my process was. This actually isn't footage from the real tests, but I needed something in the background. The actual test took much longer because I wailed on the posts at least like 10 minutes per test because I really wanted to make sure that everything was true. So for the second test, I want to see just how much flat damage is added from free element, or just element amp damage in general, I should say. So when I put free element level 1, or awakening level 1, whichever is true, on top of my weapon, I get 150 fire attack. So I head over to the training post and I repeat the same test I've been doing before, doing Step Slash, Overhead Slash, Thrust, and Rising Slash to see what my new damage values are, and I get 61 from Step Slash, 54 from Overhead Slash, 33, and 48 from the other 2 attacks, Thrust and Rising Slash, which means I get an additional 5 flat damage on top of my raw damage from 150 fire attack. This ranged true for any other element as well. I did test that out. It's not specific to element. Then I went ahead just to make sure, and I predicted that with 300 fire attack, I should get an additional 10 damage on my raw damage, because that seemed to be the trend that it was following. And to save some time, I skipped the test footage and just showed the results. That's exactly what I got. But just to make sure that I don't jump to any assumptions and just to make sure that everything's tested out, I just went ahead, did full free element level 3, which gives me 450 fire attack. I was expecting 15 extra damage on top of my raw. Actually, surprisingly enough, I got 16 extra damage. So it seems like there might be a little bit of an exponential curve, but more or less you get 5 per 150. When I went into the higher numbers, that seemed to be true as well. Higher numbers being past 450 damage. So the trends I was noticing so far is that 150 elemental damage seems to relate to approximately 5 extra flat damage, and that my weird results for some of my damage tests is actually caused by positioning. In case you didn't already know, which I should have known because I play Greatsword and it matters there, on some melee weapons, what part of your weapon hits the monster does affect how much damage you do. So I was using the longsword here. If I hit the training post more towards the tip of the sword, I got an extra 1 or 2 damage. If I didn't, I lost that damage. So to keep things consistent, because the way I was hitting it was close up mostly, I tried to stay as close as possible, and I only used the damage values from close up hits for the rest of my test. So the third test was to just make sure everything was true. I tested my raw damage crit with the free element level 2 stacked on top, so it should have been an extra 10 flat damage, and it was, which means I was able to move on to the first real test to see just how much crit element increases element damage. So in order to get crit element, I just built the Rathalos high rank chest and arms. I assure you that it's the same critical element that you get in the master rank set, which I forgot to mention comes from Velkhana in master rank, not Rathalos. So with my previous results, with my normal crit and no crit element, I got 80, 71, 45, and 62. And with the crit element test, I got 84, 75, 49, and 66, which should be up on the screen pretty soon. And of course, you can just do the math there. I got an additional 4 flat damage on all my attacks, which means a 40% increase with elemental crit, or crit element, I should say. That's equivalent to a crit boost 3 on all your elemental damage specifically, which may not seem like a lot because we're only working with 10 damage, but with higher element value weapons, that's actually a pretty big increase. So following tests are for the new set from Namielle, the new water elder dragon, that's called Namielle Divinity. There are 2 tiers to it, elemental acceleration and true elemental acceleration. So elemental acceleration is a very strange skill in that it just pops up after you do enough hits. For the longsword, it's about 7 or 8 hits. And I did 2 tests with this. I did 1 test with 0 free element, so I started off with only raw damage, and 1 test with free element 2. On the test with 0 free element, I ended up getting an additional 12 flat damage onto all my raw damage values. And when I checked after the test was over, I had 360 fire attack, which is equivalent to having free element 2 on, 300 damage, and then 2 fire attack jewels, which is an additional 60 damage. With free element on, free element 2, things were a bit different. As soon as I got elemental acceleration to proc, I was doing more damage, which proved to me immediately that it does indeed stack. When I checked my fire damage after I did the small test, I actually had gone up to 510 fire damage, which is equivalent to it giving me free element 3 and the same 2 fire attack. So we do learn here that elemental acceleration does indeed stack with the skills you have on already, and that's important for when I do my next test with true elemental acceleration. So the wording's pretty much the same with true elemental acceleration, except that the boost is much, much bigger. So I did the same exact test where I start off with raw damage, went ahead, attacked, and as soon as elemental acceleration procced this time, I got an additional 21 flat damage onto all of my attacks. When I looked at my fire attack, I had 600, up from 0 because I had nothing to start with, which is equivalent to max free element with 5 fire attack jewels. That's a lot. I then also repeated the same test where I had my free element awakening on, and it actually didn't stack when I had free element only on. But then I got an idea. I put free element 3 on, and then I put on 6, all 6 fire attack jewels, which brought me up to a total of, I believe, 640 fire attack. Then went ahead and repeated the test, and my damage increased still. And it was an additional 25 flat damage on each attack, which means it stacks on top of a maxed out elemental attack skill, and it completely maxed out my weapon. It gave me the orange number, which means the elemental damage can't go any higher, brought me all the way up to 720, which is pretty ridiculous. So I initially thought my testing was over, and I completely forgot that Silver Rathalos is a thing. If you don't want to see the armor, then I would suggest not looking at the screen, although I have layered armor on, so it might be fine. But the Silver Rathalos set has 2 set bonuses, one being slinger capacity up, or slinger booster. It increases that skill, and it's actually pretty cool, but I'll talk about it some other time. But more importantly, it has true crit element. So, of course, I wanted to go ahead and test true crit element, But the problem is you need 4 pieces of the Silver Othalos set in order to make it. And the 4 pieces I chose ended up giving me crit boost, meaning I had to backtrack and redo my values for my raw damage crit so I wouldn't accidentally screw something up. So crit boost 3 increases the bonus damage you get from crits from 25% to 40%. So I went ahead and I tested that. And I found something kind of weird, being that just like the original crit values that I saw, it wasn't exactly 40%, but it was much more drastic, with some things being like 38.7, 39.2. So like I said before, it probably just rounds up, but I thought that was an interesting little catch right there. Anyway, my new values for crit damage were now 78 for step slash, 68 for overhead slash, 39 for thrust, and 60 for rising slash. So I went ahead, put on all the Silver Othalos pieces, and tested out True Crit Element. Again, I'm using Free Element 2, so I have 300 fire attack, which means usually, without Crit Element, I will get a flat 10 damage bonus. Went ahead and did the test, and got some pretty impressive numbers, with 94 on step slash, 84 on overhead slash, 55 on thrust, and 75/76 on rising slash, which meant a flat bonus of 16 damage, meaning elemental crit, or true crit element I should be saying, gives a 60% damage bonus to elemental damage. That's actually pretty big if you consider the weapons you can use, and I have no elemental attack in these builds. They're minimalist because I'm doing test. If I had elemental attack on top of this, that damage would be increasing way more. So that makes true crit element look pretty good. It's kind of leading in damage if you're not running a build with true elemental acceleration, which already requires you to have all those elemental skills on top of it. But the truth of the matter is, elemental damage benefits weapons that hit very fast because it's a flat bonus. And since it's a flat bonus on weapons with very high raw damage, it doesn't really do much for you. So crit element is better suited on weapons that have very high elemental values, like an elemental greatsword, rather than like elemental dual blades, for instance. But I am leaving out one last thing. So how does elemental acceleration interact with normal crit element? Went ahead, did my minimalist build again. I had the high rank Rathalos mail and the Namielle coil and greaves. Again, elemental attack 2, so 300 fire attack. Plop down my affinity booster and start attacking, and I notice immediately, as soon as elemental acceleration kicks in, that I'm getting damage numbers that are equivalent / higher than my true crit element test. It's got 94 for step slash, 85 for overhead slash, 59 for thrust, and 76 for rising slash. So in this mixed set, which has a lot more open options to you, you're actually getting an overall bigger damage boost than you would get from True Crit Element. While True Crit Element gives you a 60% damage boost to your elemental damage, if my calculations were correct, this mix gives you an additional 140% to your damage. I did briefly mess around with dual blades and greatsword with this build to see if the damage increased a lot, and it certainly does. I didn't do enough tests to get a concrete percentage, but it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if you use a build like this, you will be seeing very high elemental damage numbers, so if that's what you're going for, I definitely suggest this. Hopefully the tests help clear up any misconceptions about the way these skills work. I know it certainly helped me come up with a good idea for an element build now. I just need the parts. If you made it all the way through, you must be really bored, but thanks for spending your boredom here. My name is Fukunaga Blair. Hopefully you'll come back around and listen to me talk about some other random crap some other time. Happy hunting, everyone.